Hello and welcome to today's webinar, 4 Ways to Protect Your Captured Data from Theft and Compliance Violations. I'm Teresa Resick, Director of Webinars here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today is Mark Brousseau of Brousseau & Associates, and IBML is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. Before we get started, I just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining our webinars live, you can customize your own viewing experience. Feel free to open and close the different widgets to your own preferences. Across the bottom of your screen is a list of all of the widgets available to you, and you can resize any of the open widget windows to your own liking. You can expand by clicking on the maximize icon in the upper right corner of that widget, or by dragging the bottom right corner. You can download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the Resources widget. Feel free to ask questions throughout the hour using the Q&A feature. And we will hold these questions until the end, where we should have about 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. But if you do have any technical difficulty, please click on the Help widget, and it has the question mark icon, and it covers common technical issues. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIIM.org's Webinars on Demand library in just a few days. And right now I'd like to introduce our featured speaker today. And Mark Brousseau is a noted marketer, analyst, speaker, and writer with more than 20 years of experience advising leading providers of payment and document automation solutions. He is president of Brousseau & Associates, a full-service marketing, PR, and business development firm specializing in the payment and document automation arenas. And to many of his clients, Mark has served as an outsourced marketing and business development strategist, providing a wide range of services including sales support, market research, development of marketing and sales plans and budgets, analyst relations, product management support, public relations, ghostwriting, and collateral review. So right now I'm going to turn things over to Mark Brousseau. And Mark, I believe you're going to kick things off with a poll question for us today.
Well, I'm not going to do all of the heavy lifting here, Teresa. This is AIIM's all about collaboration. And so we thought it was only appropriate that the audience do their part to help move the content along. And so we are going to start with a poll question. We want to know, how has your organization's investments in enterprise security and compliance systems, processes, and people changed compared to 3 years ago? And we're talking about your overall organizational investments. Have they increased significantly, more than 10% higher compared to 3 years ago? Increased slightly up to 10% higher compared to 3 years ago? Are they unchanged? Have they decreased slightly up to 10% lower compared to 3 years ago? Or have they decreased significantly, more than 10% lower than 3 years ago? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we're going to discuss the results in just a moment. And we are talking about the macro view on this one. So this is your organization. What have you spending on those systems, on those processes, on those people? Maybe you've hired a compliance officer, maybe some additional security personnel. So let's see how you all responded to the poll question. Look at this. 49% of you, nearly half, say your spending on systems, people, and processes has increased slightly compared to 3 years ago, up to 10% higher. But this is really telling. 40% of you, it has increased significantly, more than 10% higher. If I had to wager a bet, I'd say you folks are in financial services, in healthcare, and in government. But this is indicative of what's going on in the market overall, and it's part of the reason we're here today. But more near and dear to our hearts is this next poll question. At this moment, how would you assess the overall security and compliance vulnerability of your document processing operations? Think about your document processing operations right now. How do you have gut feeling? Do you have no real and or perceived vulnerabilities? Do you think it's fairly secure and compliant with relevant regulations and rules? Have you already suffered compliance violations and or data loss? or are you just not real sure? Take a moment to respond to that poll question. We're going to discuss the results in a second. So this time, we just want to know about your document processing operations, the nerve center, the information on-ramp for your organization. Let's see how you all responded to this question. Interesting. 47% of you believe that your document processing operations are fairly secure and compliant with relevant regulations and rules. However, look at this. Nearly 1/4 of you say you've already suffered compliance violations and/or data loss, and the same amount of you say you're not sure, which is just as bad as knowing you've got a problem. This is really important. This is why we're here today, because as we begin 2016, the biggest threat to your business probably isn't the proverbial competitor down the street. It's someone who wants to take advantage of your corporate information. We know that a growing number of businesses and government entities have already become casualties in this so-called cyber war. It wasn't that long ago that there were front-page headlines of tens of millions of retail customers of Target and Home Depot who had their information stolen from those retailers. Just last March, health insurance company Anthem admitted that it was attacked. And here's the thing about this one. As many as 80 million Americans' personal health information was vulnerable as a result of that attack. 80 million! That's 1/4 of the entire U.S. population. Last fall, the U.S. government's Office of Personnel Management admitted its employee database was hacked. The bad guys got personnel data on millions of federal employees, including their fingerprints and their job applications. Think what must be on those job applications. And even the people who are protecting us are not immune. Just recently, Juniper Networks, these are the guys who make firewalls and network security equipment, they admitted that they were hacked. 2015 was the compliance and security wake-up call for businesses. 2016 is going to be the year you all really get your ships in shape. You can't afford any more data leaks, lost patient records, or corporate espionage. The fact is that profits are hard to come by. Revenue growth is under pressure. Companies are saying we need to stop squeezing. We need to squeeze out inefficiencies and stop having such high overhead. And you can't afford the costs, the penalties, the fines, and the reputational risk that comes with these violations and data loss. And the impacts of data leaks are significant. 2/3 of companies say that the potential impact of a data leak would be high. 1/4 of all you on the phone already said you've had one. You feel this first person. 13% of companies say the potential impact of a data leak would be disastrous. That's not so hard to believe when you consider what is at stake from a reputational and financial standpoint. In fact, a lot of folks focus on the financial piece of this, and that alone could be motivation for some of you. The average cost of a data leak, a single data leak, according to studies, is $7.2 million. Now, when you think about what Target went through and was dragged through the mud, front page news, the CEO lost his job, it was a huge issue. $7.2 million seems like table stakes. The problem is that these costs are only going to go up. The increased regulations, standards, rules, depending on what industry you're in, are raising the stakes. They're raising the potential costs and penalties that you could suffer if your data is lost or if you have a compliance violation. And you all have a lot at risk. I know we have folks on the line from all different kinds of vertical industries. You might have customer information. You might have intellectual property. You undoubtedly have some financial records. And you might have project documents. All of this is important to your business. It's what you build your business and your organization on. You can't afford to lose it. And you all understand it. 2/3 of organizations see that ensuring the privacy of customer data is essential. Well, that's good news. 2/3 of organizations also see that compliance with industry and government regulations is also essential. This is a big driver behind a lot of data capture system purchases. In fact, 30% of organizations say that compliance and security considerations is the most significant business driver of document and records management projects. That's staggering. We would all assume it's cost, efficiency, productivity. 1/3 of you are buying systems because of compliance and security considerations. And that's from our friends at AIIM. And so when you think about all these government regulations, it's an alphabet soup that means one thing: COSTRISK. It's all about cost, and it's all about risk. HIPAA gets all the headlines, and rightfully so. The healthcare industry has led the way in data leaks for the past 3 years in a row, and there's nothing to suggest that that's going to change this year, despite increased regulation and increased investments. The bad guys want that data, and by golly, they're going to get it. But there's also a big push into what we call PCI compliance. These are standards that the card industry developed to safeguard sensitive payment card information. It builds rules about how to manage this card information. Watch, PCI is going to take more and more of the headlines as corporate America continues to push harder and harder away from paper-based checks and toward electronic payments, of which card is top of their priority list. So we're going to find more corporations, whereas they knew how to safeguard check information, they really don't understand how to do the same in an electronic world where it's easier for folks to intercept that information. These other compliance regulations are all also critical. And what's not listed here are 13,982 other regulations that are impacting businesses, all of them, with their own costs and their own risks. And as I sit here and speak to you today, there are people in Washington, D.C. dreaming up more regulations about how to manage your data. In fact, it came up on the presidential election cycle just recently, where people want to govern information. Well, companies have taken steps to protect themselves. As the results of our first poll question showed, you're making investments to help safeguard your information. You've undoubtedly put in permissions and access controls. You've implemented antivirus and malware tools. You've probably regulated the passwords your staff uses so they can't use their birth dates or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 anymore. You've implemented perimeter security so that folks can't walk in and out your front and back doors and literally take your information with them. You all believe that 50% of you all believe that unauthorized access by internal staff poses a big threat to your data. And so that's a big reason you're doing all of this, in addition to the folks you're watching overseas. But despite all those investments you're making at the macro level, despite all the efforts that your IT department is doing on your behalf, there's an Achilles heel in this security, and it is in the unlikeliest of places for some of you. It's your document scanning system, your data capture systems. The information on-ramp to your organization is leaving you vulnerable to the bad guys. A typical document imaging system is creating 4 major vulnerabilities that substantially increase the potential for data theft and violations of information management regulations. And for the rest of this webinar, I'm going to show you those 4 ways, and most importantly, the steps you can take to plug them so you can ensure you're not one of those 22% of organizations on the line who've already suffered a data loss. So the first risk that organizations face when it comes to using antiquated document scanning systems is they aren't encrypting their data while it's in motion, and they don't have any protection for the images or data as they travel through their capture workflows. Think about your operation for a second. You don't just scan something and it sits there. The fact is you've probably implemented a workflow, and that workflow probably is increasingly touching people who are on different floors, in different buildings, and maybe in different countries. And yet most old document imaging systems aren't encrypting this data or these images. And so while they're traveling across the enterprise or the extended enterprise, they're left out in the open, literally for the bad guys to intercept them. What's more is that in most scanning environments, operators must have network or file system rights to the location where images are written. Think about this for a moment. We now have said that in order for the system to work appropriately, operators need to have access to these images. Well, we just told you that these images and data aren't being encrypted, and now we're saying that anyone who operates the system is going to have access to them unencrypted. This obviously opens the door for an operator to read information that they shouldn't be reading. So if you're processing medical records, if you're processing financial documents, if you're processing something on behalf of a sensitive government entity, you've now laid that information out in front of unscrupulous staff. And don't give me that stuff that you know all your people and they'd never do anything naughty. It happens. But this creates other issues as well. Most old document imaging systems also have not made the leap to full disk encryption. So I talked about the scenario where images and data are traveling across your operation, your enterprise, and the extended enterprise. But in other cases, there's also their vulnerability of where it does sit right in your shop. So you might have said, well, Mark, we only have one operation. It's under our watchful eyes. What could possibly go wrong here? Well, if you're not encrypting that data as it sits in your operation, even if it's at rest, here again, you're at risk of a scrupulous employee getting access to something they shouldn't have access to. Additionally, when you have unencrypted data, operators could have network or file system rights to the location where the images are written. So maybe this information is sitting out on a network, and your operators can access this, and here again, because it's not encrypted, they're able to see something that they shouldn't be able to see. All of this shows why we need to be encrypting information. Finally, images also can be written to the scanner's local hard drive prior to writing the data to a network file repository. Think about this for a second. Most folks assume that once an image is captured on a scanner, it goes immediately to an archive. Well, this isn't the case at all. With antiquated systems, they're written to a hard drive and then moved to a network file repository. Here again, the information is out in the open for a bad guy to be able to look at or to intercept. Let me give you another example you might not think of how this manifests itself. If you have a data capture system, you probably have some sort of a tool with a set of images to train the system as part of document classification and recognition setup. It needs to understand document types so it can correctly classify them and correctly capture the information from different types of documents. There's a major problem with this. And the problem is that most older capture systems store these so-called training images locally, right on that hard drive again. And once again, it's leaving them at risk to the bad guys. So the first threat that you all face is information that's unencrypted while it's in motion, while it's at rest, and then while it's being written to places it doesn't need to be written to. The second risk organizations face is unsecured log files. A key tool in recognizing security breaches is a log file, right? We all have them. It's a standard feature in every operating system, application, server platform, scanning software. It's everywhere, and for rightfully so. It shows you what's going on with the health and operation of your system. When you monitor these log files, it can help you identify potential wrongdoing. It helps you prevent security breaches. There's a problem, though. With antiquated document scanning systems, they write these batch log files to a local hard drive of the scanner's host PC. What this does is it puts them right out of arm's length of the administrators of the system. This means essentially you've got the fox minding the chicken coop. You can't, the administrator, it's tough for them to be able to watch that log file and see what's going on. There's a second problem, and that is that these log files often contain personal health information or personal information such as check MICR data or OCR and ICR results. And look, with the growth of data capture, which has been well chronicled in AIIM studies, we know that there's more and more data being captured and put into those log files. That's information you don't want sitting out in the open. And so this is tantalizing stuff for somebody who's up to no good. It makes no sense to leave this kind of data out in the open in a log file. Think about the type of information that's in a log file if you are in the healthcare industry, as one example. So the third risk from antiquated document scanning systems is poor visibility into operator activities. Old scanning systems make it difficult to track and audit the activities of their staff. And this opens the door for unauthorized access or even distribution of sensitive data in an undetected environment. If you can't track it, you can't fix it, and you can't catch it. Keep in mind, folks, 17% of organizations admit that their staff already bypasses security restrictions placed on them. That's according to a 2013 AIIM report. That's not to say those folks are up to no good. It's just to show that staff will do the most expedient thing. Now, think about introducing a bad guy into that kind of environment where it's okay that 1 in 5 staff goes around security steps. And so when you have an environment where it's difficult to track and audit, you have an environment where you're leaving yourself open to risk. The fourth risk that organizations face with antiquated security systems is poor security management. You know, with older systems, they require manual processes for network administrators to review and to change security settings. It's a pain in the neck. In most cases, this stuff is set up when somebody originally came to install the system, and it's left alone until something goes wrong. And that's what is wrong with that scenario. It's a hassle for the administrator to change the settings. And this leads to less frequent security configuration reviews. And this puts you at risk. Manual processes do not provide a comprehensive view of a network, and they don't make it easy for you to adjust to changing business requirements to ensure that you're not at risk. So when we look at these 4 risks that I just described, any one of these can put sensitive information at risk. Any one of them is bad news. But together, they create an environment that puts your entire organization at risk. And what do I mean by that? Well, think for a moment about what your role is. As I said at the beginning, you're the information on-ramp for the organization. And if you're smart, you're trying to onboard even more information. If you can't afford to have this information hub be leaving you open in 4 different ways. And so what you need to do is eliminate these risks. And the good news is that you can do it using new technology. And I'm not here to sell you a system. I'm here to sell you an approach to a system. So I'm telling you that if you're sitting on years-old document scanning system, you're probably at risk, and it's time for you to look for a system. Get out your legal pad, get out your pen, and get ready to write down the 4 things I'm about to tell you to look for in a new document scanning system. The first one, something called impersonation. No, don't start belting out Elvis tunes. What you want is a system that writes data to a different user account than the one used by the scanner operator. No more fox minding the chicken coop. What you want to do is eliminate operator access to this network file store. All the IT guys in the audience just perked up. You want to eliminate this access to the network file store. You want to ensure that operators can only access images through the capture platform. This keeps them from looking at stuff they shouldn't be looking at and doing anything with the images and data that they shouldn't be doing. The second step is to look for systems that protect images and data. And that happens in a couple of ways. Number one, you want to look for strong encryption algorithms. Don't believe the hype. You'll hear some scanning solution providers say, oh, you don't want to encrypt things. It'll slow your systems down. For goodness sake, that is 10-year-old thinking. And we are in the aughts here, folks. So you need strong encryption algorithms that automatically protect all data stored on all hard drives and PCs, and it won't impact your system performance. In this kind of environment, your users can access data via an authentication device. So it might be a password, it might be a key, but this enables the system to retrieve the information and decrypt it. Your IT and your security folks, of course, can help you select and manage exactly what kind of full disk encryption technology you use. But the key thing is you want to make sure that you have a scanning solution that supports full disk encryption. It's not okay to have unencrypted data at rest or in motion. That just won't work. And when it comes to information in motion, you can also protect that as well. So you want to look for a document imaging system that uses something called Internet Protocol Security, IPsec tunnels, to encrypt data and images that are in motion. This is basically a framework of open standards that the propeller heads have come up with to help ensure private, secure communications over IP networks. It uses cryptographic security services. This hardened security will keep information in motion safe. It supports network-level data integrity. It supports data confidentiality. It authenticates data origin, and it protects replay. So it makes sure that folks can't intercept your information. Here again, your IT and your security staff can work with your vendor to configure IPSec based on your organization's requirements and needs. But the key thing is, you want to make sure that you have a document scanning solution that supports IPSec. And if you have an old, antiquated document scanning solution, it probably can't do that. And look, folks, we know that what's happening in the document scanning space is this concept of capture at the point of entry. We now have on-ramps all across the enterprise. And we also know that conversely, we have approvers and stakeholders all across the enterprise that need to access images both during processing and post-processing. So that means you've got information and data, images and data moving all over the place. This problem's only going to get worse. And so this is why it's imperative that you look for a solution that uses IPSec tunnels. One other strategy for protecting images and data is that any temporary images should be stored only in memory prior to being written to the network store. You don't want to write sensitive information to a hard drive of a host PC. That makes no sense. So if your solution is doing this, you need to look for a new system that will only write it in memory and not to a host PC that somebody can gain access to. The third strategy I want you to look for in a new document scanning solution is audit logging. Audit logging is a really good way to monitor the health and operation of a document scanning system. That's true of most applications. The audit log does that. And yet it's really overlooked when it comes to security. So when you look for a document scanning solution, look for one that supports detailed audit logging to a syslog server, another technical term, making the IT guys happy. But what you want to do is you want to track every activity that occurs within the software and the hardware. And this thing includes things like changes to admin passwords, anything that might have been faxed or emailed or downloaded. You want to see access to sensitive information. This will all be tracked in this environment. And here, it's easy for an administrator to monitor it and see potential problems. By the way, if your auditors haven't told you this already, I'm here to share with you that log files are also critical for regulatory compliance. There's something that auditors expect, and obviously something that they are looking for. Additionally, you want to make sure in a document scanning solution that batch log files are written directly to a network and not to a local drive. This is key, again, for getting that access that administrators need to mind the store. So they want to be able to access this information, not have it just out of arm's reach like it is with antiquated systems. And finally, when it comes to audit logging, for goodness sake, make sure that any sensitive information is sanitized in the log file. Today's document scanning solutions sanitize this information so that nothing is left out in the open. And this is critical when we think about shared services environments that so many of our organizations are moving to. We don't want financial information, health information, human resources information being in a log file. You're never certain what can be in those types of documents, and you can never be sure who's looking for it. So why leave it out in the open? The fourth thing I want you to look for in a document scanning solution is strong security management. Let's not make it difficult on ourselves to manage this stuff. And by golly, I know this webinar is sponsored by a vendor. There's no reason a vendor should have to come on site to fix this stuff for you. You should be able to do it yourself. And you should be able to do it yourself with a security control panel. These types of dashboards, if you will, provide insights, easy control of configuration. This makes it easy for your administrators to review security settings, to help change them based on the needs of the business, and it saves them a lot of time for network administrators as well as for IT professionals. It's easy to change the configurations. Today's document scanning solutions provide these types of panels so that it's not hardwired, if you will, when somebody comes on site to implement your system. You're able to drill down literally in a graphical environment to gain insights into your users, their activity, the access rules for different types of users, individual users, for goodness sake, we don't want Mark doing this, configurations, and as well as reporting. And it's easy for administrators to make adjustments. This is critical. We know that the bad guys are very dynamic in trying to change based on the different business conditions. So we have to be able to stay one step ahead of them, or at least keep up with them. And so when we look at what's going on in today's security and compliance world, we recognize that security and compliance is top of the corporate agenda. You guys know that you must work harder to protect your content. It was clear in the survey we did at the beginning that showed many of you have invested more than 10% compared to 3 years ago. The bad news is that while you've spent a lot of time focusing on enterprise security, you probably haven't spent enough time minding your document scanning operations security. And if you're using an antiquated document scanning solution, you've got the 4 key vulnerabilities that I described. The good news is that today's document scanning solutions eliminate these issues while aligning your document processing with your corporate security goals. This means that your document processing operations, the information on-ramp for your organization, can be in line with what you're doing in your business. And at this point, we'd like to ask our third and final poll question. So now that you heard me lay out the risks that I believe you might have in your operation, I want to know, based on the information I just provided you, how would you now assess the overall security and compliance vulnerability of your document processing operations? Are they significantly more vulnerable than you thought? Are they slightly more vulnerable than you thought? Are you unchanged? Slightly less vulnerable than you originally thought? Have I somehow convinced you you're doing an even better job? Or are they significantly less vulnerable than you originally thought? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen. We're going to discuss the results in just one moment. So have some of you left your offices, and are you going down the hallway to ask your managers, where are those files being written? What's in that log file we have? Let's see how you all responded to this poll question. Well, we've done our job here, Teresa. 22% of you say your operations are significantly more vulnerable than you originally thought. I guess I have been the fire ant at the picnic today, Teresa. I bummed everybody out. Half of you, 47% of you, say that you believe your document processing operations are slightly more vulnerable than you thought. 1/4 of you are unconvinced. You think there's no change. Of course, maybe you thought you were already at risk, and I haven't done anything to make it worse. Well, that's as bad as you got, Mark. Give me something else. And 5% of you believe that you're slightly less vulnerable than you originally thought. 1% of you say you're significantly less vulnerable than you originally thought. So this is fascinating, but the good news is that this doesn't require a sea change. This just requires a different approach to how you scan your documents. As Teresa suggested, today's webinar was paid for by IBML. IBML provides intelligent information capture solutions that drive business process improvements from the point of entry. IBML combines intelligence scanners, software services, and solutions to automate the most demanding document applications in banking, FinServ, healthcare, government, outsourcing, and more every day. IBML customers in 48 countries rely on its technology to accurately, efficiently, and most importantly for this webinar, securely capture and process millions of documents. If you want to learn more about IBML, you can visit ibml.com. If you want to specifically ask about document capture and scanning solutions, I invite you to email Dan Lucarini. His email address is at the bottom of the screen. And so with that, Teresa, I see we have a lot of questions coming in, so I guess it's time to put me on the hot seat.
I will certainly do that. We've been listening to Mark Brousseau. Mark, I'm going to give you a second just to catch your breath here. And while you do that, I just want to let our audience members know about a really good resource, and you can download it right now in that resources widget on your screen, a white paper from IBML. And when I read this, it fascinating information in here, and I truly encourage you to download this free copy for you right now. Just go ahead and grab this paper. The reason the URL is up on the screen is for those who are listening to this on demand. After this live webinar, people will still be able to access this after our live event. But right now for the live event, just go to the resources section, click the link for the 9 Ways paper, and you can download that right now. And one of the other things, Mark, when you were talking about the poll, and a lot of people were saying that they're slightly more significantly more concerned about the security of their information based on what we talked about today. And it's on one hand, I hate to be alarmist with some of the webinars and what we talk about, but on the other hand, it's just helping you think of all the different angles to try to get to keep your information secure. And so leading to that, a couple of the questions that have come in, who is responsible specifically for the security of the information? And I'm merging a couple of different questions together. Is it just the IT folks that need to take the lead in being responsible for this? Is it the business units? Can you talk a little bit about where some of those responsibilities lie in an organization, or where they could lie or should lie, just to ensure that these issues get addressed? Your thoughts on that? That's a great question, Teresa. And I had an old high school sports coach who said, this team will only be as good as its weakest player. And his point was that this is a true team sport, and if we don't all pull our weight, we're going to be left vulnerable to the other team. And whereas a lot of folks on the line, or maybe a lot of folks actually, probably more appropriately, who received the invite from AIIM said, well, wait a second, I run the document processing operations. What do I give a darn about information security? There's somebody with that title somewhere in a C-suite who's occupied with that. But the fact is that if we want the document processing operations to truly be that nerve center of this collaborative, cloud-based, mobile, on-the-go environment that we're painting ourselves to be, we need to take responsibility for this. And it's all going to start with this frontline staff, because on one hand, I've painted a picture where they could be the bad guys, but on the other hand, you can also see where they can help be the frontline force to resist against data loss. So it's up to us as the leaders of document processing operations to take this bull by the horn and to take steps
And like I said, the picture I'm painting here today isn't one of transformation. It's, while the results might be transformative, the fact is we just need a refresh here. We've done all these investments everywhere else in the organization. Why shouldn't we put a few dollars to this in our document processing operations to plug these obvious holes? And so there's a question actually that came in that's related to this, Teresa. And someone asked, well, for goodness sake, Mark, if so many employees are going around our security standards, how do we fix that? How do we stop that? And the question is really appropriate for this audience. You're the leaders of these departments. Why in the world are you allowing this to happen? It's not my place to stop it. It's yours. You people need to enforce the rules you have in place to ensure the behavior that you're looking for. And for too long, we have thought, well, we can look the other way because what are the odds that something can actually go wrong? Or what are the odds that we're actually going to get hacked? Well, the data now is convincingly showing us that the odds are starting to become pretty darn compelling here. And the threats are going to get bigger and bigger as the bad guys recognize, wait a second, all that paper is becoming digital. It must be stored somewhere. Go to your IT department today. When you're done here, I want you to go to them and I want you to ask them, hey, do you track hits on our server? Can you track the bad guys who try to intrude on our network every day? You'll be astonished to find out how many people from around the world are attacking your network if you're of any size organization every day. And so if you want to get your employees to stop going around your security protocols, you need to enforce it. And I think that's a great first step that you can enact this afternoon with a memo and a team meeting, and that's your first step before you do the other things I prescribed here.
A couple more questions here. Two of them I see pointing to this particular issue or to this area here. How do we talk to our bosses or executives about plugging these holes? How do you build that case? How do you get momentum in the organization
Great question.
for addressing these concerns?
This is a great question, and bravo to the person who asked it, because as a group, document processing managers are pretty darn bad at selling things up the food chain. So when it comes to getting proposals cost justified, we're really lousy at it. And you know why we're lousy at it? Because we think of it from our perspective, from the perspective of, you know what, I'll be able to process the paper a little faster, I can do it a little cheaper, and if I'm lucky, I'll be able to take out some headcount. But you know what? The boss doesn't necessarily stay up at night about that. You know what's keeping him up at night? The things I described at the beginning, $7.2 million if we have a data leak. Those aren't tactical benefits like you would normally describe when you purchase a document scanning system. Those are strategic benefits. And so when you're talking to your boss about the things I just described here, don't go and say we need a new document scanning system and you know what, we'll go a little faster, a little cheaper, and maybe have a couple less people around. No! What you need to do is talk about the strategic benefits of it. And the one strategic benefit we've described during this webinar is around compliance and security. We could do another webinar next week that would talk about the benefits around information management and visibility and corporate agility, and you can fill in those gaps on your own. But you need to frame this discussion in strategic terms, not in tactical terms. And I guarantee you, you're going to find a receptive audience because somebody upstairs is already thinking about these issues.
Another question that's come in, and someone's asking about some of the examples that you were citing in the beginning, with Target and Home Depot and just the large government agencies that have had data breaches. Truly, do we have any chance to protect the data from the unauthorized and the criminal access? Is it foolproof? Yeah,
so I'm here to tell you you've got no chance if you continue to use 10-year-old document scanning technology. I've laid out 4 ways that the bad guys are going to rip you off, and I guarantee it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So then the question becomes, all right, so I do the 4 things you just described here, Brousseau. Is that going to solve the problem? And the answer is the bad guys have every incentive in the world to figure out how to get around the most hardened security. But what you want to do, so the answer to that is, of course, nothing's foolproof. But what you want to do is give yourself the best odds of eliminating those security breaches. And certainly, there's no excuse for compliance violations that would be related to the vulnerabilities that I described. So while it's not foolproof, it is a much better position to be in, and you've got a good chance of survival.
Someone's asking, because a lot of what we talk about, with FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and is fear the only way to reach the senior executives, top management? I would think that putting it in terms of dollars and cents, the financial side of things, would be another way to partner with these critical issues. Can you talk about just some of the other strategies for helping to make this case?
Absolutely, and so you're right. So beyond the risks, right? You want to lay out the picture of the benefits here, and the fact that we're going to protect our corporate information, we're going to protect our reputation. Those are all key. But additionally, if you can improve security at the point at which information enters your organization, perhaps that takes some of the burden off of some of the rest of the organization. Clearly, as our survey here showed, organizations have invested everywhere else, and they're continuing to make those investments. Well, you know what's going to happen is that if you don't fix the holes I described, you're going to get ripped off anyway, and all of that's for nothing. And so what you need to do is you need to partner with those security teams and say, hey, look, let's put some of our attention here in our document processing operations, and we're going to align what we're doing in document processing with what you've done in the rest of the organization. And so, yeah, there's some financial benefit to that, as well as the strategic benefits that I think you want to lay out as you want to sort of lead with in your discussion.
Well, thanks, Mark. We're getting close to the end of our webinar hour, and just want to invite the audience that if you're interested in some more in-depth training, go to the AIIM website and check out specifically with what we have in Capture. But there's a lot of other training courses there. Mark has just scratched the surface with what we've been talking about today, and there's so much more to learn. So feel free to go out to the AIIM website and also to just to check out some additional learning opportunities there. And just want to thank our sponsor, IBML. Without the support from our solution providers, AIIM wouldn't be able to bring you these free educational programs. So very much want to thank our sponsor, IBML, for this. And we have been listening to Mark Brousseau of Brousseau & Associates. And then I do also, since we are coming to the end of our webinar hour, I do want to ask Mark for his key thought, key takeaways, closing thoughts, just some super important message you want people to walk away with today.
You've spent a lot of time and a lot of money as a business trying to lock down your information. It behooves you to make sure that you're minding what's right under your nose. Have you spent as much time and effort on your document processing operations? And if you're using antiquated scanning technology, I'm here to tell you that you're leaving yourself vulnerable. And that makes no sense in today's high-risk security and compliance environment, and the stakes are only going to get higher. So take a hard look at how it is you're handling scanning and data capture, and I think you'll find that there's some ways that you can do it to help mitigate risk in your environment.
Thank you, Mark. Again, that was Mark Brousseau of Brousseau and Associates. And again, thank you to IBML for sponsoring our webinar today. That's all we have. We are at the end of our webinar hour, so thank you very much for joining us today, and we will see you next time, and have a good afternoon.